When I was little, I experienced what I believe is a ghost. I'm going to be as detailed as possible since I believe that's what's important, especially ghost stories. Still to this day, I can't explain exactly what I experienced. I was 7 years old and I was asleep in my room when I had all of a sudden woken up, which is common for me. I tried for 20 minutes to go back to sleep, to no avail. Then I finally got up and faced forward. Ahead of me was a woman. She was a rather young looking woman and had older clothes on her. Looking back, I'd say maybe early 1900s or so. She looked like she was talking to someone, and I looked down. Turns out, she was. There was a little boy up to her knees. She had patted him, and he had disappeared through the wall. I then called out, "Hello?" I don't know why, but probably just to make sure I wasn't dreaming. She looked surprised for a second and gave me a warm smile. I blinked, and she was gone. I got up immediately and checked the area. It was cold, but nothing dramatic. I went downstairs and got some water. Then I went to sleep. Now, for me, I've always been a skeptic. To this day, I've found ways to poke a hole in it. Though it just kind of chilled in the back of my head. I know for sure it wasn't sleep, since I've always had trouble falling asleep. I've always been prone to waking up randomly, still to this day. When I faced them, I started feeling around me to make sure I wasn't dreaming. Did the whole pinch myself, and I was fully awake, able to look around as well as move. So sleep paralysis is out of the question. I still don't know what I saw to this day, but I feel as though I should share. The most surprising thing about the whole situation is just how calm I felt during it all. I felt as though I knew her. That's the closest feeling I can describe it. It was my first sleepover. It was also my seventh birthday. Everyone came over to my house for the party. After all the festivities, presents, cake, and games, we all settled in for scary stories in our sleeping bags and blankets in the downstairs living room. We couldn't decide on who would tell the story, so we decided to play light as a feather, stiff as a board. We were all 6 or 7 year old girls and watched this witch movie the week before and wanted to be witches. We hyped each other up. We were going to cast spells and make people float. Oh, yeah, we were so cool. We all turned the lights down and got in a circle and laid my sister down. 3 fingers under her and started chanting. It doesn't last the whole 3 verses. No one can keep a straight face, and we all start laughing and joking around instead. I really wanted it to work. Like, really bad. So I convinced everyone to try again on me, the birthday girl, and we're going to be serious and do it in a really, really dark room. They all agreed. They could be serious. They were going to make me float for my birthday. So we head to my room and get it ready. Now, my room is pitch black. Door shut, no lights, curtains on the windows, nothing, just blackness. They all gather around me and 3 fingers under, whatever, and start chanting. I don't float. I don't even budge. I tell them to be serious and actually chant like they mean it. Come on, make me float. We start again and we all see it. We all lose our minds, scream at the top of our lungs and book it out of there. My poor mum. She had 6 girls crying hysterically and couldn't get any of us to calm down and tell her what happened. She put us all in her room and went around the house. No one was in the house and all the windows and doors were locked, obviously. So she comes back and tries to calm us down. My friend Jenna, who was the first to contain herself enough to get out, between sobs, that there was a scary shadow man in the room that tried to grab her. We all lose it again. Because this is not what we all saw. Heck no. What, man? The heck you say? It was light. A light. We all saw a lightning bolt of green glowing light that flew from within the closed closet door, around us, and through the bedroom door. Not a man. It took my mum an hour to calm us all down. She finally had to bribe us to stop crying with ice cream. After we were all calm, she lectured us about scary stories and watching scary stuff on TV, and that she didn't want to hear anymore. She put us all to bed and we all slept on the floor in her bedroom. No one would sleep downstairs or in my room. The next morning, Jenna got picked up really early, before breakfast. She had my mom call her mom as soon as she woke up, way before the rest of us did. She never spoke to me again. She avoided me and was no longer my friend. Everyone thought it was weird. Years later, I found her on Facebook and sent her a message. She doesn't remember me and doesn't remember that night. So she says. I've talked to other girls several times over the years and we all agree. The light felt malicious, scared the crap out of us. Jenna must have seen something else. Backstory. I lived in Arizona at the time. Chandler to be exact, and my friend lived in Maricopa. Quite a bit of desert to drive between the two. A good 45 minutes of non-lit highway through the res. Anywho, my car's alignment was horrible, and the steering wheel shook. I had to pay really close attention to the road to keep this car straight. So I get off work and I'm heading out to Maricopa, to my friend's house. Something I do 2 or 3 times a week. No biggie. It's 11 something, because I worked 2 to 11, so I knew it was a bit after 11. I'm driving, gripping the steering wheel nice and tight, so I go straight. My headlights illuminating the street a little, and into the dirt on each side of the road. No cars coming at me, and no one behind me. I'm trucking along. Nothing weird. Same old, same old. And up ahead, about a half a mile, I see what I think is a javelino or a large dog. Common. Whatever. I slowed down a bit and didn't want to hit it at 75 if it decided to dart in the road. As I get closer, I realise it's not either of those things. What the heck is it? I slow down more. I'm approaching this thing slowly. As I come up with it, I still can't really tell what it is. It's a big black creature. At first, it looked like a large dog, but then it got bigger and started to stand on 2 legs. It was a figure that continued to change shape as it stood and turned. It was a dog. It was a pig. It was a deer. It was a sheep. It was all the things. I couldn't decide. I couldn't distinguish one from the other. It was horrible. I sped up. Fuck this, whatever it is. It's not getting me. I've had too many experiences to not nope the F out of there. As I close in on this thing, and my lights fully illuminate it as it runs across the road, as it changes shape, it's no longer black shadowy, but flesh-coloured with long arms that bend weird at the elbow and wrist. It has no face, and it's literally 8 feet tall. It hits the other side of the road on all fours and vanishes into the shadows. I mean, maybe they can go invisible, because as I passed that spot, there was nothing in the field to the left. Nothing. I went to my friend's house. I tried to explain it to her, and before I could, she said she sees that shadow thing on the road there all the time. What the fuck? Girl, I'm not coming out here anymore. What do you mean you see this all the time? Yep, she would just drive through, and when she saw it, she'd start repeating the Lord's Prayer over and over, and never stop. She said it never bothered her, but it always just stayed on the side of the road as a shadow. She didn't have any idea what I meant when I said it changed shape. I always drove out during the day after that. That's a nope from me. What did I see? Storms and entities don't mix. I grew up in Transcona, Winnipeg, a small suburb 10 kilometres away from the city. I do not remember too much from the first house I was situated at, though vague memories I still can recall, although it's small at that. From my recollection, nothing peculiar transpired in that house. Around age 5, my parents decided to sell the house and move closer to the city to establish themselves in the Kildonan area. We settled in, and everything seemed fine for the first 6 months. I was 6 when I first started to notice something was off, and it all started on one stormy night. I was preparing myself for sleep when I heard the sounds of thunder rolling in. I laid in my bed, as lightning lit up every inch of my room. My room isn't big, and my bed was stationed in the very far right of the room. Upon entering a closet, it was to the left, and there was a window at the very far right wall of the room that faced my closet. I was terrified of thunderstorms, so I couldn't sleep, and as I was waiting for the storm to pass, my room lit up as a blinding flash emitted through the window, and at my bedroom entrance, I saw the silhouette of a tall shadow creature or monster, just standing there. As quickly as my room lit up, so did it begin to darken again, and with that, I screamed bloody murder. I called out to my dad and without hesitation came running into my room to ask what. I just asked him if he could sleep with me without mentioning that thing. In the morning, I walked out of my bedroom and saw in my peripheral vision a shadow figure in my hallway dart into my living room. Cartoon cat. I was 7 and don't know what to make of this one, but I was going to bed one night and got up and peered into my closet, unsure why I did. But I saw this cartoon-looking cat. He was staring at me in a funny manner. His stature was 2D and his eyes were very strange, to say the least. I examined this cat and noticed that one eye looked like one of those spiral optical illusions. It was red and yellow. After this, it just slowly vanished into thin air. Mr. Demon. This experience is by far what I would consider to be the cream of the crop. I was 8 at the time, but I know due to the fact that the day after this encounter, I would tell my classmates. When entering the home I used to live in, there was a front door and a side one. When entering the side door, you'd be greeted with a staircase to the basement in front of you, and a kitchen to the right of you. After entering the kitchen, you could only turn to the left, as the wall was on the right. Continue going forward, and on the left is the living room. The right is the sunroom. If you continue going straight, you'll enter the hallway and see the entrance of my bedroom. On the very right is the bathroom, and if you proceed to the left from my bedroom, the hallway will consist of another bedroom on the right, and straight down another bedroom. Turning left at the end of the said hall will lead into the living room. I apologise for the lengthy detail, but I just want the reader to have a semi-vast understanding of the layout. But I digress. I was sleeping on the couch one night, and I was having a dream where I was walking down my hallway, which was dimly lit. The only light emitting was from the bathroom. I made my way to the bathroom, and as I did, I noticed to my right the kitchen entrance. The entrance looked as if it were a voidless space. Imagine a darkness that was so dark, even the brightest light couldn't penetrate its iniquity. Curiosity got the better of me, and I moved towards this void, and for some reason, I extended my arm into said void. When my hand touched this darkness, this monster, which I can only describe as a yeti with devilish horns, claws, teeth, and eyes, lunged out and grabbed me, roaring into my face, and I was electrocuted with terrible fear. Suddenly, I awoke, drenched in sweat. After gathering my sense of reality, I realized it was around 3 in the morning, so I decided to sit up, and as I did, noticed my cat sleeping at the end of my feet. Without giving the dream a second thought, I leaned over to pet my cat. I did so for about 15 seconds, until something caught the top of my peripheral sight. I darted my head up in quick motion, only to be greeted with a demon pressed up against the sunroom's sliding glass door. I instantly froze, as if I died. Its eyes were so disturbing, I can't even begin to enlighten you on its appearance. Right after it noticed me seeing it, the thing phased right through the glass, hovering towards me with its hands and claws extended. It kept on coming closer and closer until my cat saw it and ran away so quickly it didn't even register at the time. Mind you, I'm sitting up and this thing is coming towards me slowly, and in the arm's length range, I noticed that my back all of a sudden contorted into a lying position, without me even moving my back. Somehow it did. I was now lying face to face with this thing. Nothing existed at this moment but me and it. It continued staring at me, not saying anything. I had no heartbeats, no hearing, no feeling, and no emotions anymore. I said in my head, "Please, Jesus, help me." with that, it looked as if a transparent hand reached down through the ceiling, grabbing it and pulling it through the ceiling. As it was being lifted, it frantically tried to grab me and swim back towards me. As soon as it was out of sight, I shot up like a bullet, turned over to my dad, who was sleeping on the couch next to me, and said, "Hey Dad, I just saw something." He said, "Just go back to sleep." As it happens, some weekends, my father and I go out for a walk while playing Pokemon Go, and sometimes we pass by a weird school. The school isn't old as the town itself. It's not too old, less than 100 years, but almost that. Old enough to be terrifying to be around it, principally at night. Anyway, no matter what day we pass by, there are always lights turned on in some specific rooms, but we never see people around. And what the hell would people do at a school almost 11 o'clock at night? There are no night guards in any schools here, so that's ticked off of the logical answers list. And it's always cold around this school too, no matter the time. But last night, there was a thing in one of the lit rooms. I always avoid looking directly at that school when we pass by it, but last night something made me look, that way against my will. And one of the windows, there was a thing. My eyesight is not the best when looking from a certain distance, but my father saw it as well. We could only see neck up. Head was completely black and bony neck. I thought it was the distortion of the window, but the windows were new and, well, there was no texture on the glass. So yeah, definitely not a human. That thing was looking down when I looked, and for some reason I kept staring. Curiosity, I suppose. At first I thought maybe it's a night guard, but the thing slowly lifted up its head and looked at us. I thought, since I couldn't see well, it looked at the corridor. But god damn it, the street went even colder and a chill rose up from my spine and stuck to my head. The thing kept looking at us. I was terrified, but initially I dismissed it as just a night guard. My father had to remind me there's no such thing as a night guard for schools. Anyway, this presence only left after we were 5 blocks away from that cursed school. I'm so curious as to what that thing was, but I'm sure it was not human. I'm not exactly sure of what this was, but I'm sure as hell it isn't the wind or a pipe making noise. This was something that tried to scare me and my partner at the time, and something that physically presented itself, and physically pulled on our clothing and hair. This all started when I put together a sofa bed in the spare room at our house. My partner was at work, so after building it I had nothing better to do than play some games. Our cat was staring down the hallway into the spare room. Not exactly unusual, but after some weird behaviour from the cat, I thought I'd have a look. What I can only describe as a black silhouette appeared and vanished within a few seconds. This wasn't actually scary, more just surprising. More so, it felt so normal, I actually forgot to mention this to my partner. A few nights later, me and my partner both sat up after waking up in the dead of night, as if we were waiting for something. It was as if the walls of the house were screaming a silent warning, just this eerie sense of anticipation for something dreadful. A very heavy dragging and clawing of the floor very slowly made its way down the hall and toward the bedroom. I was pulled under the covers. This couldn't have been anything such as a household noise. The cat was even with us on the bed. Over the next few weeks, strange things would happen. As previously mentioned, our hair would be pulled. Quick steps would make their way into the kitchen where we were and would come to a halt, as if something would be standing in the doorway, just staring. We'd return to the kitchen with every drawer and cupboard open. The big, wide mirror in the bedroom would have handprints upside down on the top half of it. The last thing to happen was weeks after the last odd occurrence. I'd sometimes stay up worrying about my partner. You see, they had breathing issues and heart issues, etc. Their breathing would slow down until it entirely stopped, before a massive breath would be taken and the loop started again. As I sat listening, and as the breathing slowed to almost a stop, a heavy, deep exhale came from behind me, almost like a horse. I later found out that my partner had the same happen twice and was too worried to tell me. This whole series of events isn't the first paranormal thing to happen to either of us, but sure as hell it's the strangest. Whatever it was felt sinister and thankfully went away. Visitors were witness to many of the things mentioned, and some things smaller not mentioned. Thought I'd give my experience after reading so many interesting stories. I know my story pales to many strange encounters, and mine has no proof of occurring. I had just gotten home from work, and I was sitting in my room playing video games. No one else was home with me. I left my door half open as per usual. Out of nowhere, I briefly heard faint footsteps outside, which caught my attention. As I turned over, I could nearly make out a faint outline of a hand reaching for my doorknob. My door, and then my door slams shut, and it was shut with a lot of force. I completely froze in my room, not knowing what to do. Keep in mind, it's a 95-degree day here in Denver, so all of our windows were closed and the AC was running. I do have a fan that's on a low setting, but I always leave it on and it's never closed my door, much less slammed it shut out of nowhere. This was part of a series of escalating experiences over the past week. I've heard things slam to the ground in my basement. We checked, and nothing had fallen. Scratching and knocking on my bedroom door, footsteps, and just an overall bad vibe in the house. Even my mom, who never talks about ghosts or spirits, told me she heard heavy footsteps upstairs and also heard my door close when I was out at work today. Ever since we moved into this house around 2010, a lot of people have experienced unexplained phenomena. My sister has said she's experienced many loud noises late at night in her room, now mine, and even claims to have seen a spirit in her, now my, closet. Multiple friends of mine have claimed to see a man in pink running through the house on separate occasions, knocking on windows, and I've heard my entire name called out to me. But this was over a much larger timeline and never felt malicious. It seriously ramped up this past week. So I had this strange thing that happened to me, and I really don't know what to make out of it. Maybe someone had a similar experience or knows something about this phenomenon. So I had this dream which happened in like 3 stages over the course of a year. When the dreams occurred, I was already like 21 or 22, so I've been out of school for quite some time. Finished it at age 17. So the first stage of the dream was that I was back in school in the front schoolyard, and I was there with all the other kids during break time. But I strangely couldn't find my friends, who were usually hanging out at the same spot. The school bell rang and everybody went back inside. Still no signs of my friends. Stage 2, which happened like a month after stage 1, was a bit more strange. So I was walking through the very crowded hallways towards our classroom. I came around the corner to notice that nobody was there, which was absolutely odd to me, so I went back on the floor to find it all empty, and a certain sense of danger, like there was some sort of threat, came up within me. Stage 3 was pure terror. Happened half a year after stage 2. So I was already standing there on the empty floor when something started chasing me. Not like something manifested, more like an invisible kind of thing. Chased me through the entire school, stairs up and down, most of the rooms. When all of a sudden, I was back there where the chase started in that hallway. The hallway was a plus sign shape, so I was looking into the other hallways. It was broad daylight, by the way. When all of a sudden, that girl was standing there at the end of the hallway. She was, or is, a real person. She was in my class, but left after like 7th grade because her grades weren't that good. In real life, we never had to do much with each other, but there was no bad blood or anything. I never had like feelings towards her or anything, so it seemed pretty random that she was standing there. Upon noticing her within the dream, I was speaking to her from a distance, like, hey, what are you doing here? What's this all about? Let's get out of here. She wasn't responding. She was just standing there staring at me. So I started walking towards her, constantly looking for that entity that chased me earlier. As I was walking towards her, I continued talking to her when all of a sudden, I felt like something was off. Something wasn't right. As I was getting closer, I felt a certain dread, an evil presence, if you like. I was getting closer when all of a sudden she looked at me and I saw it. Pure evil. I don't know why or how or whatsoever matter of fact. I'm crying right now as I'm writing this. So, anyways, I realized that this thing is the evil, and I ran for my life. I eventually made it through the emergency exit to the back schoolyard. I was getting further away, seeing her coming through that same exit, but I was already far away. I suddenly realized that the whole world seemed to be frozen in time and space, if that makes sense, when all of a sudden I'm hit and fall on the ground. She is standing over me, looking at me, and for the first time speaking. So she says that this place is hers, and I shall never return. Then some sort of black hole opened up underneath me. I fell into it and woke up. That was already a couple of years ago, and even though it was quite real slash surreal and haunted me for a couple of weeks, I almost forgot about it till recently. The real life event. So I've been working as a sanitation worker, or garbage man, as some may call it, for almost 4 years now. I've seen a lot of stuff, experienced a lot of stuff, and had great and messed up times. So not too long ago, one of the drivers called in sick, and since I have a driver's license and all that, I drove his garbage truck that day. Also, I had his long-time co-worker who knows the tour in and out with me. It was early this year when it happened, so it was still winter. We were going through a street that I recognised, and I said to him, hey, I went to school nearby. And he asked me, like, is it this and that school? I was like, yeah, how do you know? And answered that this one was of our clients, for the lack of a better word, and that we would be there in a minute. I was so excited seeing that old place again. I thought about the memories, the sports events, all that. Well, until the point we entered the compound. So I said that I know a shortcut, so I drove the truck through an alley and onto the neighbour's schoolyard, which was directly next to our yard. I was entering our former back schoolyard, and something strange happened. Holidays were already over, so there should have been lots of kids and teachers, just like in the neighbour's school. But there was absolutely no one. Also, all the window blinds were up, which usually meant that people were there. Everything was frozen under a thick layer of ice, and I started to feel strange. So I talked to the guy who I was with, and he just said, man, just be happy about it. Fucking kids are always running in front of the truck and shit. So we were making our way around the building, to the place where the bins are located. He got out to load them. I stayed in the truck to switch on the auxiliary drive and keep an eye out on the workspace surveillance, making sure he won't get hurt or anything. And all of a sudden, everything went silent. The loud bin loading mechanism, the aux drive, everything. All of a sudden, it was like the place was frozen in time and space. Sound familiar? I started looking around like I was a crackhead or something, and I looked through the windows. I didn't see no one, but just pure darkness. In that very moment, that place was telling me that it didn't want me there. I was totally in the zone, when suddenly the door slams, and my co-worker gets back in the truck. I asked him, yo, you alright? I didn't even hear you emptying the bins. Hey, that might sound crazy, but did anything strange happen while you were outside? He replied, well, funny you should ask. Because for a moment, I thought every happening stood still, and I felt a certain dread. We left, and I never came back. It was so weird, and I didn't know what to think after it happened. Then after we dumped the waste and cleaned the truck, I suddenly remembered that dream, and I felt even more fear. Soon, we were back at the station. I told my dispatcher to place us on a different tour, and if I ever have to drive there again, I quit. So my mom died in 2015 when I was only 24. It was very sudden. She's visited me in a dream once, and sometimes, usually when something big is happening in my life, I'll just randomly smell her very unique combination of perfume that she always bathed in. I commute a minimum of 2 hours a day, and about 6 weeks ago, there was a severe thunderstorm in my way. As I got closer, my phone started going crazy with weather alerts about tornadoes and hail. At this time, I was heading north, which was parallel to where this storm was sitting, and I could see exactly how big and bad this storm was. It was intimidating as fuck, knowing I was about to turn west and head straight into the heart of it. In all of my hours on the road, I've hit some serious weather, and it's never kept me from going home. Thunderstorms, freezing rain, high winds, hail, even some whiteout conditions when I lived up north. My point being, I have driven through all of it. I had a feeling in my gut about this one though. I knew it was going to be a long drive home, and I found myself hoping that I would make it. So I turn west and face this wall of clouds and drive right into it. As soon as I got under it, it started dumping rain on me, but within 3 miles, it stopped and everything got super still. Not good at all. I floored it, but didn't get too far because there were other cars in front of me. This is where I start to panic. I can see the clouds moving in different directions simultaneously in front of me. Oh fuck, I yelled out. We gotta get the fuck down the road, people. As you'd imagine, no one sped up or did anything differently. I glanced to my right and noticed that the clouds have started full rotations, and further back, there's a very obvious funnel forming over a parking lot. I'm crying now. I'm gonna die. This thing is gonna pick my car right up and off this fucking road. I can feel the wind tugging at my back of my car and lifting it up off the road. Mom, if there's ever been a time that I need you riding with me, it's now, I said through my tears. I just kept driving like I always do. After having to do 35 to 40 miles an hour in a 70 the rest of the way home because of the heavy ass rain, I made it home safely. It was the weekend, so outside of sharing my story with my husband, I kind of let it slip my mind. Next week, when I was travelling the same road home, I passed the spot where I saw the tornado forming, and a wave of relief washed over me. I was very relieved that I didn't die there, but this feeling was overwhelming. I felt warm and fuzzy. While I was trying to figure out where this profound feeling was coming from, something weird happened. Something blew in my ear from the back seat. All of my windows were up and my air conditioner was on high, yet somehow I could see my hair that sits by my ear blowing the opposite direction. I thought back to that day and immediately knew it was my mom. I believed that she was there to validate that she was riding with me that day, that I could have almost died. So this happened a couple of years ago, and I still can't figure out what it really was that I saw. It all started when my family and I flew to South America for a week to see my granddad. He lived in a small village of the southwestern coast of Ecuador. I could be sharing a room with my older brother and cousin. They had a window which looked out onto the driveway. After a long day of talking to my granddad and playing wrestling with my brother and cousins, I was ready to turn it in for the night, when I suddenly heard and saw two stray dogs barking at a bush on the right side exterior of the driveway gate. I passed it on as a cat or as an opossum. Here's where things took a darker turn. At 1:20 p.m, I woke from a vibrating and pressurizing sensation in my left ear. My cousin and brother were still snoring away. I don't know why, but something urged me to look out of the driveway window in my room. I saw through the iron gate some humanoid silhouette, which looked about 6'2", crouchers walking in a swift way, pacing from one direction to another. And then it just blended into the darkness and vanished in one clean moment. After viewing that, my stomach began to ache and I was in a lot of pain and distress, and I just remembered crashing onto the bed to drift off. The next morning, I just decided to keep what I saw last night private. After I finished my breakfast, I got dressed and went downstairs to the driveway gate to examine the perimeter for any forms of past activity. And I saw massive bare feet footprints, which were in a trail of circles. But for the rest of the week, nothing else happened. To this day, I still don't know if what I saw was real or a hallucination. But if what I saw that night was actually true, then that wasn't a human or some domestic animal. I believe that it was something more supernatural. I'm from Australia, and when I was 8 years old, my family lived in a house off the Pacific Highway. It backed off to bushland and had quite a large backyard. I used to play outside all the time because of this. One day, I was outside as usual and heard my mum call my name, so I ran inside to see what she wanted, hoping for lunchtime. When I got there, she was busy washing up. She said, "Where were you off to in a hurry?" She'd been watching me from the kitchen window, which overlooked the backyard. I said, "You called me in." She said that she had not called me, and that I must be imagining things. I just thought she was messing with me at first and said, "Come on, Mum, why'd you call me?" She stopped what she was doing and looked down at me and said, "Sweetie, I didn't call you. Maybe you just heard the neighbours yelling and it sounded like me." I was adamant it was her. It sounded exactly the same as the hundreds of other times she called me. I started to get a little grumpy and said it was definitely her. She told me to go back to playing and that lunch will be ready soon. This is when I started to cry and demand that she stop messing with me. Suddenly, I had her attention, and she asked why I was so sure it was her. I told her the reasoning, that it sounded exactly like her. She eventually comforted me and convinced me it was my imagination. The next week went by as normal, until one night I awoke to a tapping and scratching noise. I looked around. When my eyes adjusted to the light, I couldn't see anything in my room. So I just assumed it was an animal in the walls or roof. Possums quite commonly come into the house for warmth and to nest in Australia. So I tried to get back to sleep. It went on for what felt like half an hour. So I looked around again and listened closely to the noise. I saw something in my peripherals at my window. I gazed over and saw what to this day still gives me nightmares. I'm 26 now. It was a thin figure, about 2 inches wide. It had elongated arms and fingers, all black and white eyes. It was tapping on my window while staring right at me. I stared at it for a moment, not believing what I was seeing, thinking I must be dreaming. For some reason, I just felt like it was toying with me, like it was saying, "I'm coming to get you." Fear took over. I stuffed my head under the blanket and screamed as loudly as I could, "Mom!" I didn't stop screaming and didn't hear my mum come in. When she grabbed the blanket to see what was wrong, I jumped back, thinking that whatever the hell was outside my window had got in. She asked, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I pointed over to the window and said that. It was gone, and she asked me what was it. I explained what I had seen, slowly as I was trembling and could barely get the words out to describe it. She said I could sleep in her room. I didn't get any sleep that night, not for the next few nights afterwards. I can still see the image in my mind as clear as the night it happened, 18 years ago. It's made me afraid of the dark. I sleep with the lights or TV on still. I've tried to rationalize it. I've tried to find answers in paranormal sightings, folklore, and dreamtime stories. I thought when I found the answer, when about 5 years ago, I learnt about mimi spirits. They resembled what I saw at first until I read and discussed with elders that they're small and shy, are in no way harmful. They look after the land and don't like interacting with other beings. So I crossed that off as a possibility. I have no idea what it was, but I have a feeling that it was the thing that called my name, mimicking my mother's voice. Much like a skinwalker does. However, we have no tales of those in Australia. The closest thing to that here is a bunyip, a shapeshifter that lives in billabongs and attacks passing travellers. Well, there were no bodies of water nearby, so I also crossed that off. I have thought that maybe it was all in my head, that my mother was right, it was just my imagination. Yet still, the image is so strongly imprinted in me, as is the voice. I have no idea if it was real or if it was something trying to lure me away. What I do know is I'll remember it till the day I die. To preface, I work as a resident advisor in a building that I lived in as a resident the year before. I'm familiar with the building, its layout, who lived and does live there, and its particular bumps and creaks. Experience 1. I live in a double room on the second floor. My roommate will be gone the entire day. He had a girlfriend in a different area and would stay there. And I'd returned from classes or a walk on the weekend to find my stuff would be moved around my room. Finally, getting fed up, I confronted him, to which he told me that his stuff was also shifting around. I certainly didn't touch his stuff, and were the only two with the key to the room. We start talking deeper on the subject and mention how we feel like we're being watched from the closet. We try to build a rational explanation, but it's really difficult to explain since neither of us are at fault with sole access to the room. I'm religious, he's not, but we're both spooked enough that we decided to go to the Catholic church down the street the next day, fill a reusable water bottle with holy water, and bless the room with it. We don't get to it that day, but decide to go to the next. He has classes from noon till evening, and I have none, so he leaves. I do some work for an hour and decide to take a nap. I sleep on my side, so I'm facing away from the closet, but I turn when I sleep, so I wake up turned towards the closet. I'm uncomfortable, so I go to turn on the lamp, which is on the other side of the bed, and I see a woman in a black dress standing over me. I'm extraordinarily frightened, blink, and she's gone. I reduced that experience to a sleep paralysis episode, which I haven't ever suffered from. Said my prayers to ease myself, and gave up on trying to fall back asleep. I never mention this to anyone, because I don't want to be seen as crazy, not even my roommate. The next day, we get the holy water and bless the room. It feels lighter, but to make sure, I invite a friend who claims to be a psychic to read the room, and she says it's clear. There are no incidences in that room. Experience 2. Now I'm an RA, and I've been assigned to the same building that I lived in the year before. Residents are moving in the upcoming weekend. My floor is entirely empty. Part of our job was to go room to room and check for damages, so that residents wouldn't be charged for anything they didn't do. It's mid-August, and the 70-year-old overly insulated brick building is quite literally 1,000,000,000 degrees. I've seen enough movies to know you never enter a dark room alone, so I call my friend on FaceTime and grab a flashlight with new batteries. Now, I begin the process of going room to room. I'd quickly scan with my flashlight to find the light switch, then I'd check around. All is well and good, until I come to one room. I unlock the door with the building's master key, and immediately, I notice that the room is freezing cold. Every other room is swelteringly hot, but this one is like a window left fully open in January levels of cold. I'm uncomfortable, but I have to do my job. The minute that I cross the threshold of the door, both my flashlights with my new batteries and my fully charged phone turned off. I noped right out of there and had to sit on my heater in my room for 15 minutes to decompress. I returned to finish my examination 20 minutes later, and the room is boiling hot like all the others. I cannot explain this. Experience 3. I've moved in on duty with the other RAs, and it's a mixed group of people who worked in the building I'm in last year and this current year. Our shift is 4 hours long, so we're meandering when we start talking about how some strange things have happened. One of the RAs says that her friend used to live in the building, and her story goes like this. The friend woke up one night around 2 a.m. and had to use the bathroom. She gets up and opens the door and sees a woman in a black dress walking down the hall and turning into where the bathrooms are. When she gets to the bathrooms, they're both vacant, and the woman is nowhere to be found. Now I'm weirded out, because I haven't told her about my experiences yet, but the description matches mine. The other RA mentions an episode where she woke up early in the morning and watched a black, shadowy figure cross from her door to the window and disappear. She also mentions that her room was freezing cold, which would have been weird for late April, but not unheard of. Now I tell my experiences, and we conclude that there is something happening. Upon research and some digging, we find that a woman had passed away in the building from a heroin overdose. Apparently, she and her boyfriend were shooting up one night when she took too much. The boyfriend was a dealer, and this was still a harsh war on drugs period, so he fled, leaving her to die alone. Her family sued, and the case was dismissed with prejudice, meaning it couldn't go to court again. Whether that woman is the same woman who haunts this building is unknown, but our building staff got together one night and politely asked whoever is here to please leave us alone, and that we were sorry that happened to them. We haven't had any experiences since, and hopefully won't have any more at all. I swear that everything above is true. It scares me, and it makes me very anxious even typing it. I hope that there may be some thoughts to help clarify or expand this encounter, or maybe even if this was one ghost or more, since it seemed to respond to holy water and also a request for peace. In the fall of 2018, my husband and I went on a vacation to Spain, specifically Ibiza and Barcelona. As we were trying to fly home, our local connecting flight was delayed, which made us miss our international flight home to the US. So we had to stay an extra night in Barcelona. We booked a random chain hotel, Renaissance I think. We checked in, settled in our room, everything seemed normal. And we got in bed to go to sleep. When I sleep, I wear an eye mask and earplugs because I'm a light sleeper. But on this night, as I was trying to fall asleep, I was thinking of nothing in particular when all of a sudden an image of a demon's face flashed behind my eyelids, and I had this evil energy around me. I then felt like I was being pushed down into the mattress and was being separated from my body. The best way I can explain it is if you've seen the movie Get Out, when they take over his consciousness and he falls into the darkness, and it's like he's looking through a small window. Anyway, I remember trying to yell my husband's name, but I couldn't. I felt like someone or something was taking over my body. Then all of a sudden, I had control again, but the evil feeling was still there, and I didn't dare take off my eye mask, because I didn't want to see anything that might be in our room. So I laid there with my heart racing. I eventually got to a point where I tried falling asleep again, and it happened again, with the demon's image of a face flashing in my eyes. Took a while, but I was able to finally fall asleep. Sounds like sleep paralysis, right? But here's the weird part. When we woke up in the morning, before I even had the chance to tell my husband what happened, the first thing that came out of his mouth was that he had multiple nightmares. I told him about my experience, and I asked him what his nightmares were about. He said he felt like he was travelling in and out of hell, kind of like Keanu Reeves in Constantine. My husband never has nightmares, but he said these were really freaky. Curious to know anyone's thoughts. Still to this day, I've never experienced anything like that. I'd never experienced something like that before in Spain either. I'm 31. Back when I was just a kid in high school, I would explore abandoned places. First, it was just stuff in town that I could ride my bike to. But once I had my first car, I went all over. October of my junior year, I had devised a plan to scare the hell out of my two little cousins. I was going to prank them at an abandoned house. I just needed to find the right one. Luckily, my weightlifting partner had the perfect place. I call it the Hewitt House. I'll call him Billy, but that ain't his name. Billy told me his grandfather was a farmer. He owned a ton of property, and the lot across the highway from him had a house on it. It had been empty for about 10 years, ever since this old woman, who he originally purchased the land from, had died. I told him it sounded perfect. Old home, easy access, someone died in it. What more could I want? But Billy told me right then and there that this place really was haunted. He didn't go in alone. He never stayed long, and never at night. He then told me the story about how the house was finally transferred to his grandfather. His grandma bought all the land, about 80 acres, from this couple. The agreement was that once they passed, the final plot their house was on would then exchange into his hands. Not long after, the old man died, but the woman lived a while. Just her and her dog, all alone. One day, her granddaughter came out to visit, but when she got there, Grandma wouldn't answer the door. As if that wasn't concerning enough, her damn dog was barking and growling like the devil himself was in him. She drove back across the street to tell Billy's granddad what was up. Billy's grandfather went over, found the dog in its state. He tried what he could to temper the dog down, but eventually he gave up. He went back to his truck, got his gun, and killed the dog. They went in to check on the old lady, but the stench said enough. They think she'd been dead maybe 2 weeks. Her faithful mutt waited most of that time before dining on parts of her limbs. Well, now we have a story. That Friday, Billy, my girlfriend at the time, and myself drove out to the Hewitt house. It was clearly abandoned. The bushes in the front growing almost so large as to consume the front end. You could almost miss the house from the road, so high was the shrubbery. But we pulled into the driveway and went around the back. The place was solid. It had settled some. The foundation must have sunken somehow. The door frames for some of the rooms were twisted. Some doors couldn't close. There was a line on the main floor, and the basement steps exiting the living room were all crooked. It was terribly disheveled. Trash was heaped everywhere. It looked like Billy had maybe come in and just broke shit at some time. We looked it over, and it was creepy. You came in through the back kitchen. This led right into the dining room, which if I stood in the entrance of the kitchen, I could look left to a set of stairs going up, and a set of stairs going down into the basement. Standing in the same position, I could look right into a bathroom that went straight through to a small bedroom. At 10 o'clock was a smoke room, and at 3 o'clock was a small open living room. The small living room was adjoined the tiny bedroom that connected to the downstairs bathroom. If we cleaned it up some, this would be a great space for my plan. After we looked around, we headed upstairs. It was small up there. Only a small landing with an open access to an attic that was the roof over the kitchen, and 2 small bedrooms with a quarter bath. The first bedroom had been a sewing room. The second, furthest down, had been the largest with the small bath. The 3 of us checked it out, openly discussing ideas to scare my cousins. When I sat on the bed inside the largest bedroom, I knew immediately what I had done. I got up like I'd sat on a needle. Billy looked at me from the doorway, very pale-like. I looked back at the old bed. The bare mattress showed a ruddy dark stain all along its frayed edges. It was like a pale rust nail had been dumped there. Or blood. That night, we did some cleaning up. I set some items to the side I used to scare my cousins. A couple chairs, some pans, a lamp, blankets, and this creepy-ass doll. It was an old fabric doll with an old plastic head. The one everyone knows where the eyes close as you lay it down. It was so old, rotted, and looked straight out of a horror film. I put it in the chair in the living room as I intended to make its centerpiece. We came back a few times that October. Take a couple bags of trash here and there and hang out. There was a lot of junk, but something started to stick with me. First, Billy never stayed long and he left as soon as the sun began to go down. This is Michigan, so in October it starts to set early. But the most alarming thing to me was the house itself. The doors were all jacked up, hard to open, near impossible to fully close. Yet each time we came, some would be open, some would be closed. Drawers in the kitchen would be on the floor, cupboards wide open, and lastly, the fucking doll would always be somewhere else. The second time we came, it was under the window. The The third time I found it in the smoking room. The fourth time I never found it. Halloween was a big night. I ran out to a store and bought some glow-in-the-dark paint markers, fake blood, and snacks. Because horror is scary. Shopping made us late, so we went to the place around 8 p.m. It's after dark, so Billy is somewhere else. They just left me and my girlfriend to set up some of the scares. We went in through the back door, through the kitchen, but both of us stopped dead at the entrance of the living room. Every goddamn door was closed. I had this little mag light from my car. I shone it around, speaking aloud my observation when Jody says the chair is moved. Sure enough, the old metal rocker was against the window with that creepy doll on it. I couldn't believe it. I went right across the room and grabbed the doll. Jody took off behind me, running into the bathroom. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, half scared, stupid. I spun around to see her red hair in the light right behind me. "That's not me," she whispers, her voice quivering as she does. Confusion gave way to an abstract terror as the door to the downstairs bathroom slams shut just behind her. I hear what can only be described as a gale force rush through that bathroom into the small bedroom. It blew its way through the bags of clothing and debris we had bagged and stuffed into the small bedroom as some makeshift dumpster. We ran out as fast as we could. Whatever was in that room just threw shit around like it was nothing. There were loud thuds and banging like the dressers were being toppled over and the old mattress were being swung at the walls. I made it to the door before Jody. I turned to make sure she followed, as yet another bang of the door could be heard. She was in near tears as we ran out into the lawn. We sat in my car, staring that house down as it was awash in the glow of my headlights. Jody wouldn't come back. She was a good Christian girl, and whatever it was that was there was some sort of evil. I drove slowly past the house as we pulled out, shining it to see if maybe I got punked. Billy and his friends had maybe come out to get one over on me, but there was no one else. There was no truck. Even as I sat in the drive not wanting to pull out, hoping that maybe I would catch a glimpse of some light or someone in the shadows. But aside from the bushes up front, it was all just empty fields. Billy's truck wasn't home down the street at his grandfather's either, meaning he wasn't home. I dropped Jody off, then went to grab my cousins. I told them what had happened, and they didn't believe me. We grabbed some food, some drinks, and then went back to the Hewitt house. Once I got there, Billy and his friends were just arriving themselves. We went inside together. I didn't say a word to them, but I was scared shitless. We walked into the kitchen, and I lost my breath. Every cupboard, every drawer, every door, everything was open. Much of the stuff we had cleaned up, it was all over the place again. The only thing that looked like it was left was the bag of fake blood and markers lying in the middle of the floor, right there in the living room. Billy and his friends tried scaring my cousins. They used firecrackers, shouted dumb ghost noises, and even went outside to a window at one point to bang on the glass. It was all just stupid, childish things. But for what it's worth, it worked a little for them. In the years since, I've poked around inside a lot of abandoned places. I've had a couple strange experiences and ran into a squatter or two, but there was never been anything like the Hewitt house. You can still find the place if you find yourself out here in Michigan. I drive by it myself from time to time. Its rot has consumed a lot of it by now. The structure isn't safe by any means, but to this day, every time I go by, I can still hear those footsteps, the doors, and Jody whispering, "That's not me." My old primary school was creepy to me. I remember always being scared of walking around the halls, and I hated being in classrooms there. There was nothing wrong with the schools. It just creeped me out. It was quite a nice school and wasn't that old, so I'm not sure why it creeped me out so much. One day, it was really sunny. I was about 10 or 11, and my teacher sent me and my two other friends to get some sports equipment from the hall, as he wanted us to do PE outside to be in the sun. The rest of the class went outside, and me and my two friends went to the sport hall. First, I'll say how the hall was structured.
The hall was huge. There were 6 doors in the hall. 2 led to a path that brought you to the pitch at the back of the school. One was an exit to a hall leading to more classrooms, and another led to the principal's office. The other 2 doors were for the storeroom where all our sports equipment was kept, and the other to a small kitchen that teachers would use for their lunch and when cooking with their class. All of the doors in this hall were extremely heavy, and there was no way of closing them without hearing a loud bang. It didn't help that the walls were flat, so the sound of the doors echoed throughout the hall. If someone would come in, you could hear the doors and their footsteps. We entered the hall to get tennis rackets, and assumed because the rackets weren't needed until later, we would sit and talk for a bit before heading to PE. I checked the kitchen to check no one was there, and we went into the storeroom to grab the rackets. The door had 2 windows, but they were only small slits, but they were big enough so you could see out them. We stopped talking while searching for the required sports equipment and went to leave. One of the girls I was with turned off the lights and went to grab the handle of the storeroom door, while the other girl and I stood behind her. Right when she wanted to open the door, someone walked past the door. I don't mean they were far away from the door, they were right beside it. The figure was tall and didn't even look at us. It was like a shadow. It had no definitive features apart from what I thought was football gear. We all froze and stood there staring at the door. The following conversation went as so. Girl in front of us, did you see that? Me, another girl, yes. Girl beside me, it was probably someone in 6th class, the year above us, as the figure was tall. We opened the doors and I went and checked the kitchen. No one. When we had seen, it went in the direction of the doors leading outside, which were significantly louder than the others. They were closed shut and we hadn't seen anyone outside it. Panicked, we left the hall and just stayed silent. When we got to the back pitch where our class was, we told them all what had happened, and they all followed it up by telling us their own experiences in the hall, with whispers, hearing people walking when they were alone in the halls, etc. I had had experiences, like hearing people walk in the hall when it was empty, but never seen anything up to that point. The girl who was beside me in the storeroom described the same thing as me, a dark figure that spread quickly across the window of the door. Later that day, me and one of the girls were sent on a message for our teacher and walked all that was filled with pictures of classes from previous years. Everyone always stopped in that hall to look at our old class photos. So we stopped and looked at the older pictures and were taken when a lot of our teachers attended the school. On the wall, there was a memorial for a young boy who had attended the school about 20 years before us, who unfortunately passed away. My friend looked at it confused, and looked at me confused. I asked her what was wrong, and she said, "Wasn't that the boy who walked past the storeroom in the hall this morning?" I was pretty sure she was just trying to scare me, but the boy in the picture was wearing a sports uniform. To be more specific, a football uniform. To this day, I can't explain what we saw in that hall, and it makes it even creepier that we all saw it and recalled seeing similar things. I've been staying with my grandparents for about a week, sleeping in an upstairs bedroom. Admittedly, the room hasn't been used in about a year, and I was the only one upstairs. My grandparents are spiritual, religious, and pray several times a day, and we share a wall with a holy shrine of sorts, which is why I'm confused as to whether it was truly paranormal or not. Every night for the past 5 or 4 days, I've been waking up gasping at around 5 in the morning, and for a brief moment, I can clearly see something in front of me. It doesn't have a humanoid body. If anything, I'm guessing it's an apparition of some sorts. When I wake, it floats towards me, extending its reach, and by the time I come to my senses, it isn't there anymore. The first few days I was convinced I was seeing things solely because I was tired and not getting enough sleep. I've been prone to seeing things when I get too little sleep, but they've always been hallucinations of people I know. Nothing sinister. But this time I'd see a shapeless form, somewhat like that tunnel thingy from Donnie Darko, if that makes sense. Almost amoeboid. Somewhat clear, but visible, with a metallic sheen like liquid mercury today. However, I woke up in the same way and it was much closer. Literally inches from the foot of my bed. And it had a humanoid form, but skeletal. Like the framework of a mannequin with the same metallic clear appearance. And it was floating towards me. And this time, I could see it for moments after I came to my senses, moving towards me. My stomach sank and I felt dread. I blinked, and then it was gone. I know that it wasn't sleep paralysis because I was able to move and sit up straight immediately. I knew I saw something. I've had paranormal experiences as a child, and I've seen things before, just never in this form, which is why I'm curious. If anyone's experienced something similar, I'd love to know. Or if not, I'd love to hear possible theories as to why or how I saw what I did.